We have been cut off from our history, ancestral achievements, and legacy for a long time. Several reasons exist, from Mongol invasions to burning 400,000 manuscripts from the Library of Cordoba, from Christian conquests and decimation of knowledge to the civil war between different sects of Islam. We ought to take the blame upon ourselves. I say this in my book. It is not too far fetched to say that we Muslims dug our own graves. Centuries later, our generation is facing intellectual oppression. We are constantly challenged to prove our knowledge and looked down upon as a civilization that has given nothing to this world except suicide bombers and men with masks carrying guns terrorizing people. We are cornered and left dumbfounded. We have no substantial response to these allegations. But that can change. You can change that. You can be that change, and it is ironic as nothing aforementioned would have come to pass if we followed the first command of Allah, Iqra, meaning read.
Welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast, the podcast that goes beyond motivation. If you're serious about leveling up in every area of your life, mentally, physically, financially, and spiritually, this is for you. Each week, we bring you world renowned experts sharing practical, actionable insights to help you grow and get real results. If you're ready to take action and make change, let's dive in.
First thing first, thank you so much, Salim, for taking a time out and joining
Yes,
us on the Growth Mindset podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here.
you are welcome, and I'm very happy that one of your colleagues approached me to do this. I am actually looking forward to it just as much as you are. So the feeling is mutual. Thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Perfect. So let's get started before we dive into introduction. So one of the main things that I want to talk
Hmm.
about is what inspired you to write The Golden Age of Islam? Was there any
Okay.
specific moment or realization that triggered that yes, you should do something like this?
Right. So I'll give you a little background about myself. So I am basically a researcher. I like to research about a lot of things. So if there's any topic that hits my mind and I put my heart to it, I go very deep in it. So I wouldn't say it is a particular date or point in time in my life which was like a pivotal moment for me to start researching about it or start writing the book. It's something that has been in making for the last 2 to 3 years, ever since COVID 19. I started since in COVID, we had a lot of time at hands, and I teach Arabic calligraphy, and my course was ready and up and running. And I had some time at my hands, and I thought, you know what, uh, let me do something that, let me research on something that may have happened in the past, because there is a narrative that has become a sort of an accepted discourse that Muslims did not contribute anything to this world, which is sort of a given in the entire world. And I thought to myself, how could this be possible? Uh, when you look at humanity, the probability of one of the largest civilizations that dominated the world for 800-900 years, how is it that they didn't contribute anything to make the world better? And that grain of thought sort of led me into researching on our ancestors, our scholars. And once I started researching, I didn't have any intention of writing the book. I'll be very honest with you. And I think I said this to you when we had a preliminary call last week. But what changed my mind and why I decided to write the book was the sheer amount of contributions that we've made to the world. It was not possible that I learned so many things and I would not share it, because I'm fundamentally a teacher as well. And I have a habit of sharing knowledge that I've earned, which is what I used to do with Arabic calligraphy. And I realize it and I understand that not everybody is a researcher. Since I am a researcher, I like to share knowledge that I've gained. And this kind of knowledge, the magnitude of knowledge, the spectrum of contributions that we've done was just incredible. And there was no way I was not going to share it. So that is the whole story of how it started and how it is currently going. So that is why I wrote the book.
I think that's very interesting, right? Because I think there are two, I would say, that's my observation. I think we could classify a lot of Muslims into typically two categories as of now. People that kind of have done some research and they know that, Islam has contributed, Muslim scholars have contributed a lot to the existing modern science, and that's the backbone. And there are some that have no idea, right? They think also like they've not educated themselves, uh, they've not spent time, and they just think that science is what has contributed everything. Whatever we see now, it's because of these European scientists and uh, you would say authors, writers, philosophers, whatever they may be, right? But the idea for this conversation, right, Salim, was precisely that I wanted to spread some more awareness through you to kind of let these audience know that what Muslims have done a lot, especially for these folks that don't know much about the kind of contributions Muslim thinkers have made in the past. So I wanted to understand from your perspective, since the book that you've written, right? Let's touch upon some of those important contributions that Muslim thinkers and scholars have made, which you think most people don't know.
Right. Okay. So, firstly, I'll just show the book so people know that this is the book we're talking about. This is the book, The Golden Age of Islam, and what it was and why it matters. So, I'll just touch base on the point that you had first made, that there are two sections or two categories of Muslims. One who have done their research and know and understand that we've contributed to the world. There is another section of Muslim that is living in oblivion, completely uh, cut off from their legacy. And I think both categories need enlightenment, because I was of the opinion that I know about the golden age of Islam, but believe me, when I started research, I realized I don't know anything. So that kind of pushed me to write it, so that even those who know a little bit, tad bit, they will realize that what they know is not even scratching the surface. And the second section of people, that is people who have absolutely no idea of what we contributed, I think it's not their fault that they don't know. It is the fault of our own people who did not maintain the legacy. So we could pass it on to our current generation, and 1,000-year old history is completely wiped off the map as if it never existed. Now, now, having addressed the first point that you said, let me give you some examples of just how big our contribution was. And I have, when you go to my website and look to buy the book, I've written a description. And in that description, and even on Amazon, I have written a very bold line. And that statement is, had it not been for our discoveries, the world would have been at least 600 years behind in terms of scientific achievement than what it is today. And this is not an overstatement. And I'll prove it to you just by giving you a couple of examples. The first example that I'd like to give you is law of refraction of light. Okay, we all are taught this law in school in science. I don't know which grade, maybe sixth or seventh or eighth or maybe 10th grade. I don't know exactly when, but every school in the world, every single school teaches this law, and we know that law as a Snell's law, behind named after Willibrord Snell, who discovered it in supposedly 17th century. However, however, there are 2 points I'd like to mention here. Point number one is the further research I'm doing. I'm actually doing more research on my second book, which is based on the life of Ibn al-Haytham, the first scientist in the world. So while researching on that particular individual, I found out that Willibrord Snell had access, direct access. Listen to me carefully. Willibrord Snell had direct access to the book of optics called Kitab al-Manadir by Ibn al-Haytham. Okay, and not just him, as I've written in my second book, which inshallah will be released in the next 3 months. Vitello, Johannes Kepler, Roger Bacon, even Isaac Newton, all these people had access to Ibn al-Haytham's work, either directly or indirectly. Okay, Vitello was so inspired by him that he mentions his name 200 times in his own book. Roger Bacon, who was one of the most famous optics, he mentions Ibn al-Haytham at least 20 times in his magnus opus. And there is an undeniable proof that Isaac Newton had direct access to Roger Bacon's work and Vitello's work. Okay, in fact, I was making a tree chart for my book, which starts with Ibn al-Haytham and goes to Isaac Newton. And one can clearly see that Isaac Newton had the copy of a book called Perspectiva. So Roger Bacon and Vitello, he had access to both these works. Vitello being the more important one, and his book is called Perspectiva. And we have absolutely no clue that these people accessed Ibn al-Haytham's work. Do you see what I'm saying? And in my book, I think in chapter 10th, I have made a claim that Sir Isaac Newton has a very famous line that everybody knows. Okay. And this line goes as this: if I am able to see further, it is because I stand on the shoulders of giants who came before me.
Wow.
Okay. And I claim in my book, who are these giants he's referring to? It's not Aristotle, it's not Ptolemy, it's not Archimedes, it's not Galen. None of those believed in the theory of light as we know today. They had a different theory, which Ibn al-Haytham was the first person to prove wrong. Okay, and that's called emission theory. Greeks believed in emission theory. Ibn al-Haytham was the first person to propose intromission theory. And I'll explain you if you'd like me to. Isaac Newton believed in intromission theory and he furthered it. In fact, after the Book of Optics, that is Kitab al Manadir, every single work of Greek was rendered obsolete and useless. Every single scientist in optic from the Renaissance referred only to the Book of Optics or Book of Optics through other books like Perspectiva, as I told you. Okay. The first person to talk about scientific method was Ibn al Haytham. As in, how do you prove a point that you're trying to make? Before this, they were theorists. In fact, I was reading, as I said, I'm researching on the next book on Ibn al Haytham, and I was reading the work of A.I. Sabra. He is a gentleman who's done the most extensive work when it comes to Book of Optics, and he has translated the book of Optics from Arabic to English. And Ibn al Haytham himself in his book says theorists who did this. You see what I'm saying? So he didn't use the word scientists. He didn't use the word, astronomers or doctors or physicians. He used the word theorists. And that is very, very important because he knew the difference between theorizing something and proving something to be right.
Yes.
Okay. So the entire scientific method that we use today, entire scientific method comes from Ibn al-Haytham.
Wow.
He taught us in, there's a famous saying by Jimal Khalili. He is a physicist from Iraq, born in Iraq, but he lives in UK. He says, and I'm paraphrasing it, he says the biggest achievement of Ibn al-Haytham was not one particular thing. It was how he taught the world to do science. You know how big that is? So my point here is he showed the world how to go about achieving a certain result. And he was of the opinion that if you achieve a result in multiple ways, same result, then you can prove a certain point. In his treatise, Kitab al Manadir, he doesn't just state the proof, he gives steps if anyone wants to redo it. So we talk about camera obscura, which is one of the biggest achievements, right? He gives you steps how to set up camera obscura and not just say this is how it is done. So I think that is one of the biggest achievements. And the second thing which actually led me to this point was Willebrord Snell and the Snell's law. Law of refraction of light, as I was saying, is attributed to William Snell. Okay. However, it was Ibn Sahl who discovered this law 700 years, at least 600 years before Mr. Snell did.
Wow.
And he actually proved it. And this is a known fact. This is not, uh, how we say arguably. There is no arguments to this. When you approach any academic who has done work in optics, he or she will tell you it was Ibn Sahel who first discovered the law of refraction of light, and not, I mean, you can say that William Snell probably did it all by himself. Okay. And the only reason why I give him credit is Ibn Sahl's work was supposedly lost. Okay. And it was only discovered in 1990s by a gentleman called Rushdie Rashid. There were two treatises that was discovered. I think one was in Damascus and the other was in uh, Yemen, but I've written it in my book, but don't quote me on this.
Okay.
So he brought these two manuscripts together. The treatise is called On Burning Instruments. You can check on Google, On Burning
Okay.
Instruments. And uh, and lo, lo and behold, the law of refraction of light is explained in all its glory in that book. And so
Wow.
we essentially gave the world law of refraction of light. Do you know the kind of impact it has on you and I? I'll give you a simple example and then I'll let you ask you the next question. The medicines that you eat or consume, right? It has compositions, different
Yes.
ingredient contents come
Yes.
together
Yes.
to make that composition perfect. If it is even 0.1% other than what it is supposed to be, it can be fatal. Do you agree?
Yeah.
That is done with the help of a refractometer. And refractometer works on the principles of law of refraction of light. And who gave this to the world? We did. And we Muslims are not aware of this. How can I ask anyone else to be aware of this?
Wow.
So these are the two contributions that are off the top of my head. But believe me, there are so many that I can keep going. But inshallah, through the
Yeah.
course of this podcast, I can divulge more details.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that you brought up, like you said the context in who you are. I think it is more important for people to understand that you're not someone who's just coming in and talking about things. You're someone who's sitting and doing the research day in and day out, reading those books, understanding, getting references. I think that is what is more important. Giving references to why we are claiming something the way we are claiming, right? Um, there is one other thing which you mentioned, which I want to ask before I get to the next question. Was you said Ibn Hisham, right? Was the person who actually thought how to do like experiments or science, right? Um, when was this? Before all of this thing happened? Like, what was the age when Ibn Hisham was born? For people to have some context.
He lived at a time which was kind of turbulent. Abbasids were set. So, golden age of Islam
Okay.
has an epicenter called Bayt al Hikmah, which was in Baghdad. Okay, this was set up by Khalif. Baghdad was founded by Khalif al Mansur. His son uh, laid the foundations for the golden age of Islam's Bayt al Hikmah, and then his son Al Ma'mun, he funded most of the projects that
Okay.
were undertaken during the Bayt al Hikmah period. And this was around 150 years before Ibn al Hisham was born. So Ibn al Hisham was born somewhere around 965 CE, 1,000 years, and he died in either 1040 or 1041. And I say this on authority of A.I. Sabragan, who's done the most in depth research about his book. In fact, I'm reading the translation by A.I. Sabra for the book of optics. So, in that, he confirms that there were many biographers at the time, and there's one person called Kusti, if I'm not mistaken. He is known to quote that Ibn al Hisham lived and worked around 1040 C, and he died during that time because it was after a year after he completed one of his books. So it was that time, 965 to 1040. But the most
Got it.
consensus that we have amongst people, and by the way, when I say scholars, I don't mean ulama. Okay, when I say scholars in this podcast, I mean the scientists or the biographers or the historians or the geographic people, geographers who maintain the record. Okay, just to be clear. So
Yes.
yeah, these scholars are of the opinion that there is a general consensus that he was born in 965 and died in 1040. But there is an absolute unanimous decision based on historical records that he was born in Basra, which is in Iraq, and he died in Cairo, which is in Egypt. There's no dispute about that. So whatever he achieved was 1,000 years ago, just to put things into perspective.
And that was important, right? Because what is the reference period for us to understand? So that's good. Thank you. Now, one of the other things which I know is the basis of this conversation, right, which is the golden age of Islam. So, what exactly is the golden age of Islam? Like, can you help people understand?
The golden age of Islam basically is called a period of time in the medieval world where Muslims achieved a lot of groundbreaking things. And this period is considered around 700 years. There is a slight difference in opinion. Some say it is 7th to 12th century, and others say it is 13th to 18th century. However, sorry, 7th to 12th century and 8th to 13th century. This is the opinion. However, it is 500 years. That is the 100% consensus. So we dominated the world for 500 years. Okay. And we made incredible achievements from science to history to medicine to geography to cartography, astronomy. And
Astronomy.
astronomy is different than astrology, by the way. We Muslims didn't believe in astrology.
Yeah.
Astronomy, that is charting the stars,
Stars.
communications, travel, and hospitals. We built the first hospitals in the world. I know, controversial, and if you want, I'll give you solid
That's
proof.
important.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
give you solid proof why we are the ones who built the first hospitals, and why we should be the one given the right credit. um, but yeah, so there was growth, there was achievement for these 500 years. And this all started during the Abbasid era in Baghdad, with the groundwork that was laid by Al Harun al Rashid, then Al Ma'mun, Al Musta'sim, Al Mansur, Khalif. And these are all the names of Khalif that I'm
Mhm.
quoting you. And Bayt al Hikmah was set up in Baghdad. And even though uh, Muslims and Persians and Greeks were at the crossroads when it comes to war, they fought with each other. But when it came to knowledge sharing, there was no enmity. Okay, we procured a lot of manuscripts from Greeks,
Yes.
and we undertook the translation movement that went on for centuries, not centuries but generations.
Yes.
And we achieved groundbreaking things. For example, one of the heads of Bait al Hikmah was Al Khwarizmi. You might have heard his name.
Yeah.
Okay, in case you don't know, that's how we get the word algorithm, because Latinization of his name is Algoritmi. That went on to become algorithm. Al Khwarizmi gave this world algebra. Nobody knew what algebra was. He actually set up what algebra is. Okay, back in the day, all the solutions were done in geometry. Okay, so for example, if you want to calculate x plus b equals to 0, okay, the way Greeks would do is they'll form a triangle, rectangle, square, they name sides, and then they draw hypotenuse. Excuse me. They would draw hypotenuse, then draw another angle, and it just became too complicated.
Yeah.
I've cited this in my book with proof. And then I introduce people to Al Khwarizmi's algebraic expression and show the world just how easy it was after Al Khwarizmi discovered algebra. Second thing, he also discovered algorithm.
Mhm.
And funny thing is, without algorithm, we wouldn't be sitting here. And he was one of the founding members of, if not the founding member, one of the earliest scholars uh, of the Bait al-Hikmah. And in all its glory, Bait al-Hikmah was a huge library where manuscripts of many generations were brought and worked upon. So this whole period, then it moves on from Bait al Hikmah to different places. Like it went to Cairo, where it is there's another House of Wisdom. I don't know if I translated it in English earlier, but Bait al Hikmah is called House of Wisdom.
Yes.
There's another House of Wisdom in Cairo that is called Dar al Hikmah, and this was set up by Fatimids. Okay,
Mhm.
Abbasid and Fatimids, right? And then there is another library. I use present tense here because I'm talking in that timeline. Okay, there's another library in Cordoba
Mhm.
that had 400,000 copies of manuscripts, largest library in the
Wow.
world at the time. Okay, and that was Umayyads. Okay,
Mhm.
as you know, there was a civil war at that time, and
Yes.
Damascus and all these places were, I suppose, under the Abbasid Khilafat,
Mhm.
and the Umayyad had fled. The Umayyad Khalif had fled to Spain, Andalusia, and that was a different Khilafat. So we had
Yeah.
these two parallelly running Khilafats at that time. So the golden age of Islam basically spans all these areas. For example, there is a doctor, surgeon called Az-Zahrawi. Not sure if you've heard about him. He basically constructed or made 200 plus surgical equipments. Okay, and here's a
Wow.
shocker. He was from Cordoba, Andalusia, and here's a shocker for you. Many of those instruments are used even today. Do you know forceps? Forceps are generally used to pull babies out of a mother's
Yes, yes.
womb. Yeah, yeah, okay. Guess who made that?
Wow, don't tell me he made it.
Yeah,
That's
he
interesting.
was. And there is also an undeniable fact. You can check this. Everything I say, please double check it. Don't trust me. Go and double check. In fact, that's the whole purpose of me writing the book.
Yes.
It's a starting point of you starting to research about these points, right? So he was the man who defined syringe, and I'm being very careful with my words. So listen to me very carefully. The oldest known definition of syringe comes from him, Sahrawi. Nobody before him defined syringe. So they would use it, but there's no definition. What does syringe do? This is what it does. But he was the one who defined it, that syringe is an instrument, surgical instrument, that is used to inject medicine in your bloodstream and extract blood for investigations, which is the exact definition of syringe. So this is a period of 500 years that we dominated the whole world.
Now, obviously, you've mentioned all of these different discoveries that Muslim thinkers were able to bring forth, and obviously, we did not know about this. Do you also feel that these all were underappreciated in this modern age today? I know you've mentioned that there are all of these, like Sir Isaac Newton and others have in some capacity told their name, but do you also think the names have changed in certain regards where now we don't no longer recognize that these are actually Muslim thinkers?
Oh, absolutely. There is no doubt about that. No doubt about that. But there are two aspects to this. One is the scholarly aspect. The other is the monarchy aspect. Okay. Uh, Scholarly aspect is you do change the name to make it more readable. Okay. So, for example, Gerard of Cremona, he is responsible to translate majority of work that we had saved into Latin. Most of the Arabic literature was translated to Latin, and he translated names like Al Khwarizmi to Al Gorizmi, or maybe it might have happened at a latter time. But there was no cynicism to this. Okay, look, scholar recognizes scholar. So I don't think they had any ulterior motive. I don't think they wanted to hide their achievements. Okay, this cynicism started when the monarchy understood that this could be harmful for our religion if we show that the other religion, that is Islam, is the foundation on which we have built our buildings. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
So when it went to this is my theory, okay? You can refute it. So when it went to monarchy, they categorically eliminated our names or Arabic names. So let me give you an example. When I read a research paper written by a scholar who's from US, say for example, uh, when he quotes, let's say, Ibn al-Haysham, he will say Al-Hazan. He was known as Al-Hazan in Europe, also known as Ibn al-Haysham by his original name. Okay, this is a
Okay.
scholarly approach. But when a monarchy or people of power approach, they will simply say Al-Hazan. That's it. So cutting off our legacy from our young generations. And we should also be to blame. We should take equal blame because we didn't maintain any of these. All of the
Very true.
work, all of the work that is survived now is through Latin translations or majority of work. However, I should also say many works have survived in Arabic as well. The point I'm trying to drive is these works that have survived in Arabic are stored somewhere in a library or a museum. Okay, we didn't make use of it to further our knowledge. Whereas
Yes.
everybody from Europe who was interested in learning had access to these groundbreaking treatises. Treatises are nothing but book written in a elaborate format. They made use of it and they furthered it.
Correct. And I think you pointed out something which was very important, that it is the blame's on us, right? And I think it is important that we recognize that it is us that should have hold this book to a more sacred ground, refer to this more, so that we could go ahead and take those books, build on top of it, and then go on contributing. I think to a lot of extent this is happening in the West, and a lot of Muslim uh, scientists, researchers are doing it, but I think we are to blame. And I think the reason why I asked specifically that was because sometimes a lot of Muslims think that, what, just because we are Muslims, people are trying to put us down. They're not talking about our discoveries. That's not the case. Like how you rightly pointed out, the scholars recognize scholars, right? Scientists recognize scientists, and they go ahead and do call these out. I've read those out myself in a few books where authors have calling out Muslim scholars there, and they're giving that recognition. But it is that religious schools sometimes, or religious groups, that want to put us away. But the blame's on us here, right? Like we Muslims should work, we should know where we are coming from. That's the only time we can grow.
I think this is where our podcast will segue into the most controversial thing that we might discuss, and that is the role of our ulama in this. Okay, so I think it is important for you to understand one more thing before I make my comments about the ulama. I am a revert. I was born in a Muslim family, but for 30 years of my life, I stayed away from Islam because the kind of things I saw Muslims do was just despicable to me. There was no way I told myself that I will follow this. But something happened at the background, and somebody told me to just check the life of the Prophet. And if you think he was the same like you see Muslim men behaving now, then you don't accept Islam. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I'm a researcher. I will not take anything on face value. Okay, so if somebody says something on authority, it means nothing to me unless I can
Yeah.
verify it. Okay, so Islam came to me through books, not through hearsay, or not through, what people say, ancestors. I studied the life of the Prophet in the most neutral manner possible. And I am a critic. I will question everything, be it anything. I will never take anything because somebody said so. ठीक है? So when I accepted Islam, my first dua from Allah was I. So essentially, I did believe that there is a higher authority. I did believe in Allah, but I chose not to follow Allah, if it makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so once I accepted Islam, I made dua. The first dua I remember, and I will never forget this, that dua was, give me the understanding of your book as you want me to understand, not as somebody else understood it. Okay? Not the translation. I don't want to read
Beautiful.
Quran as translation. No. I want to understand what you have, what is revealed to our Prophet. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I apply that to this day. So that is the reason why I always question things that go against Quran.
Mm.
And when I started reading Hadith, I couldn't get my head around it. Honestly, I couldn't. There were so many things that were questionable, in even in Bukhari for that matter. And people will hate me for doing this. They'll call me names. They already do so. But I will not shy away from. I will not mince my words. Even in Bukhari, when you compare some of the, not everything, some of the hadith of Bukhari with Quran, completely different in meaning. And to be fair to Bukhari, he very clearly stated, if you find something in my book that goes against Quran, please throw my book.
Mm.
Okay? But that's not what we do. We always say Quran and Sunnah, Quran and Sunnah, Quran and Sunnah in the same breath, right? And it has become a pontifying situation where we treat Quran as if it cannot exist without hadith.
Mhm.
I have even heard ulama saying, how will you understand Quran without hadith?
Mhm.
That's the stance that they take. And I oppose that stance. Hadith is something that adds to the literature, okay? But you can't compare Quran with anything. And I say that because our ulama have not played an important role in maintaining our ummah, in maintaining our unity, if you know what I mean, right? So the division that we have in the ummah, the direct blame of that goes to the ulama, nobody else. Because look at what we have become. Have we not become blind followers of our sheikh, right? We have, for example, let's say you are Devbandi. Let's say I believe in Imam Shafi'i. Devbandis believe in Imam Abu Hanifa. Okay?
Yeah.
Actually, no, let me not do that. Let me just quote Imam Abu Hanifa itself and two of his followers, two sect of his followers. One call themselves Devbandi, the other call themselves Barelvi. Okay, but to my knowledge, you can correct me if I'm wrong. To my knowledge, they both follow Imam Abu Hanifa, fundamentally speaking. But look how different they are. They can't
Mm.
stand each other. When I go to the lowest point of my life when it comes to being a Muslim, the lowest of the lowest point is when I go to a masjid and it says this is a Deobandi masjid, this is a Ahle Hadith masjid, this
Yeah.
is a Sunni masjid. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Sunni in India is used in a different context. The Sunni in the around the world.
Yeah.
That to me is the lowest point. That is the level that we have stooped down to. Okay, and that all comes down to our ulama dividing us. And there is no other way, no other way. I have historic, in fact, again, I come back to this. While I was researching about Ibn al-Hashim, I was shocked to recover, or not recover, but uh, to read about these things, that it was our ulama who stifled our scientific knowledge. And in my first book, I've referred to it in a line, but now I have dedicated an entire chapter on how they did it. And you know what? If it was an isolated event, I would have, fine, it happens. People make mistakes, right? But no, it was not an isolated event. It was a well coordinated sort of a battleground against our achievers. Well coordinated battleground. And some of the leading names, like Imam Ghazali, was a part of it. So I think we should take this with a pinch of salt, that all the Aimma that we had, Imam Ghazali or all four Aimma that we had, they were all human beings at the end of the day, right? Don't you think they could make mistakes? The
Yeah.
problem arises when we pontify them and make them infallible. And what does Islam say? There's only one entity that is infallible, not even the Prophet. Only one entity, that is
Allah.
Allah, right? Why can't we take it with a pinch of salt that, okay, he's my Imam, believe it's okay, he's Imam because there's a consensus that he contributed a lot to Islam, which I agree with. But couldn't he have made mistakes? There is an ayah in Quran right after Ayatul Kursi. There is an ayah after Quran right after Ayatul Kursi which says, La ikraha fid deen. What does this mean? It means there is no compulsion in religion,
Yeah.
right? And there is an Imam who says, if you find somebody who's left Islam, you can kill him. Why? And why have we not questioned this? You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying? And there are many, many controversial things that have not been addressed, and they should have been addressed. And our golden age of Islam fell to that. And you
Mm.
remember I said in at the beginning of the podcast that we stifled our own growth.
Yeah.
It is because of these people, because that's when we became blind followers. And I said recent just a few seconds ago that it was a coordinated effort. Now what do I mean by that? What people did at that time, those who were ultra orthodox, okay, they got the Khalif under their influence,
Mm.
okay, and they started to dominate his decisions, like Khalif Mu'tasim, Mustasim, then Al Mansur, Al Harun al Rashid, and then Al Ma'mun. These were all of the opinion that we will encourage free dialogue. These were of the opinion that we will accept. It's okay to differ, but we will respect the opinions. But when these scholars, not scholars, sorry, ulama, I'm trying to differentiate here because by scholars I set an expectation. I'm talking about the
Yes.
golden age of Islam.
Yeah.
The ulama, uh, they set out a school of their own thought. Okay, and all the graduates of these school held higher positions in the Khilafat, and they ensured that these people influence the Khalif in the way we want them to influence him. Okay, and as a result, anyone who had an opposing view was eliminated in some way or the other. Now, here's the thing. Here's a catch 22 situation that even Imam Ghazali faced, and that is they could not eliminate these achievers, these scholars. Why? Because they already had a lot of following. People believed in them. So, what happens when you go after a publicly noted figure? There is a case of civil war, correct? So, how do we discredit them? We can't keep let this going because it's the matter of power, right? If we hold the power, then we hold the people. Okay, look at ourselves. We are absolutely blind
Yeah.
followers. We are blind followers to only our sheikh, not to the sheikh of the other sect. We will criticize and whatever they say, we'll take it with a pinch of salt. But when our sheikh says it, khalas, it's the end of the story, right? So they wanted to hold that power, and as a result, they came up with a solution. What was that solution? Let's start a hearsay stating they were murtads. Khalas.
What is a
Okay.
murtad?
So a murtad is basically somebody who has left Islam or left a faith and has decided to not follow it. Be it disbeliever basically.
Okay.
Okay? Right.
Okay.
So what happens when you call them disbelievers or murtad? They automatically lose their following because the fundamental is Islam. The base is Islam and you build
Yeah.
on that. Correct? And that is why there was this incredible movement against our own scholars which led to stifling of our own golden age.
So basically, it is our kind of own scholars and
Yes.
that civil war that happened in between these prominent individuals, which led to the downfall of
Yes.
how we were leading the Islamic stage,
Yes.
right? The
Major
age
part.
of Islam.
Major
Major
part.
part. Okay.
There were other factors, of course, like the attacks by Mongols and then
Hmm.
civil war between Abbasids and Fatimids and Umayyads. So
Hmm.
these were factors responsible that added fuel to the fire. And there's a saying that when Baghdad was invaded, uh, and you know they destroyed the library of Beit al Hikmah, Tigris, which is Euphrates, I think Euphrates River is what we call it.
Hmm.
It ran black with the ink of all
Oh,
the
okay.
books. That's a saying. It could be exaggerated. I have nothing to say on that.
Yeah.
But Mughals did destroy Baghdad. There is no two ways about it. And because of that, all the scholars they scattered, and there were inventions like Maragha, like in terms of astronomy, I think that is the cornerstone of golden age of Islam. But that happened at the fag end, I think in the 13th or 14th century. Maragha revolution is what we call it. Famous name called Nasiruddin Tusi that comes to my mind, and I'll talk about him slightly more. But that that was also affected by the Mongols.
Sure. And I think this is important what you touched upon. Yes, that what you mentioned obviously is controversial. Uh, a lot of sects obviously when they look at this, probably that whole different opinions obviously are gonna also talk about this. But I think there's another, because what you said obviously is based on your research and your own opinions and thoughts as well, right? This is what you think led to the downfall of what it is. I'd also like to put a few things out from what I also feel based on what I have learned and shared, right? Because I think what is more important to learn from for to us, like basically for us as Muslims, is to understand what are those respective areas that could have led to those downfalls, so that we could correct those mistakes, work together. What has happened in the past has happened. We can't change it. What can we do today to ensure that we don't repeat any mistakes where we are putting ourselves down, right? For example, I've read, I've not to great extent, but obviously I've read the discoveries of Al-Khwarizmi, Ibn al-Hisham, other very important scholars, like the like how you were talking about the first school, right? First hospital was obviously created by, yes, was created by Muslims. Yes, I agree. But at the same time, I've also read Imam Ghazali, and to be honest, I like his work, right? I've seen. I'm not sure about, okay, what did he do with regards to political aspects? Now, obviously, there are different ways we can look at the things, right? Political aspect, you can look at spiritual aspect. Based on the book that I've read from Imam Ghazali, I find it interesting, and to a lot of extent I also like him because of the kind of things he talks about. Self reflection, talks about, you should just worry about God, right? And don't worry about what the world has to say, because I've read his own life, like how he was holding a very political position at an early age, right? He was a very powerful man, and in one of the discourse when he was teaching, he actually realized that he has become a very egotistical man. And he tells us in his book that, what, I became a very egotistical man. And that's when there was a point where he lost his eyesight, and then he went to travel, right? And 10 years he was working as a cleaner or a sweeper in a masjid. And that's after which he came back, and then he started writing, saying, what, from being here at the top, I hit rock bottom. 10 years I was just we like sweeping this floors and everything. And then I had some own revelation. I got that, there is no point chasing political figures. There's no point chasing power. If you have to do something, go and just submit yourself to Allah, worship Him, like, do that. I think that is important for us to understand. Like, let's not paint two different, like, understand where what a person is talking about. Either it's a political aspect, it's a spiritual aspect, right? Yeah. And because the reason I say this is because this was something which I had read a book, and I interacted with that individual. He's no longer here. He was also an ulama, I would say, right? He's written multiple books. His name was Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, right? He's based out of Delhi. He was based out of Delhi. Very beautiful man. He's written over 200 books, and he was a man who also always spoke about, you know learn from this. People have flaws. No one is perfect, right? But learn from those individuals what it is. Let's not paint. Do not combine political Islam with the spiritual Islam, right? If you try to combine this together, then you're gonna be misguided. You need to understand, if this person is telling you something, what is he saying? Is that aligning with the political agenda? For example, if you're talking about different sects, certain sects might talk about something which might be relevant or supporting only their narrative. That's a political perspective. That's something that you have to understand. For example, let's say you're talking about Barelvi, right? Barelvi or Sunni, as you said, there are different sect. Yeah, any sect. So if they find out you're saying something which is totally against their sect, they will disregard it. They'll not even consider it, right? So there you have to understand that it's a political thing. That just because it is going against your group thinking doesn't mean it is wrong.
The
So
point you are making is the political difference and the religious
correct,
aspect to it, right? Okay.
correct,
So I have a disagreement here with you, and I'll give you an
sure.
example, but you complete your point.
When a group identifies that, okay, this respective what other group is trying to tell me is going against my own group beliefs, they totally disregard it, even though there might be a base that it could be true. I think what we need to do is, and this goes back beautifully to the point that we were making, right? You gave a point, I gave a point. People have difference of opinion, it's fine. That is what we need to work on, right? That's where we understand that, okay, that person is an individual, right? He has his own thoughts, which means he's an independent individual who thinks. He's a critical thinker. I think we need to understand that, yes, when there are going to be strong individuals, strong thinkers, there will be difference of opinions, and that's fine. We just need to work towards it and identify, okay, what are things that we agree on, and build on top of that to ensure we can go move forward as a community, as Islam together. Yeah, go ahead, you're saying something.
One point as I'd like to say is the last point that you said. I completely agree with you. That's how it should be. But you said there is a political version of Islam. There's a religious version of Islam. I'll just correct you. There is no political version of Islam. It is just Islam. Okay. There is a political version of managing things as per Islamic jurisprudence, which is called theology.
Mhm.
My point of disagreement here is, if it is really political, then why do we have Ahle Hadith Masjid? Why do we have Barelvi Masjid? Why do we have Deobandi Masjid? Is that not religious aspect? What is masjid? It's a place of worship. Why are you segregating that part?
This is what I think, right? To what you mentioned, I think that's a very important point. I think when people say it's a political perspective, it is also to do with they just want to stick to their own narrative, their own to preserve power, right? It's one of our own way of as humans to basically defend ourselves to ensure we can stick to that. And let me correct myself also. When I say political, not political Islam, it's a political view of Islam, right? Which is different than, because Islam is Islam. You can't do anything about it, right? There is no version of political version of Islam. It was political view of Islam, where, for example, there are a lot of kings, caliphs that you were talking about initially, right? A lot of in those times, people said, we want to spread Islam, and hence we will go and fight that respective country. A lot of the kings and a lot of the powers, a lot of the caliphs at that time just wanted to have that respective land. That was a power move, right? But people assume that, okay, and what kind of image they painted? They painted the image saying, you know what, we will spread Islam by this. There are very rash and, like, very, I would say, some black spots that we've had in our experiences, where I know I've interacted with a few Christians, and they've said there have been scenarios where when Muslims went into that appropriate country, that king actually slayed an entire group of non-Muslims, right? That did not accept Islam. Hmm.
Just a small point I'd like to add here, and it's a point of correction that I would like to make. You did say that Khalifas wanted to make a power move and go to different parts of the world to spread Islam, and they wanted to capture the land. That's what you said, right?
They wanted to capture the land. Spread
Right.
Islam was a message that they said, this is what we
Okay.
want to say. But
Okay. Good.
yeah,
That's the point I wanted to draw, because I think it was a slip of tongue when you said the
yes,
power move was to go to different places and spread Islam. That was
yeah,
not the case. Okay.
okay,
As with any empire, they want to expand their boundaries.
true.
And that was the case with Khilafat as well. They wanted to expand the boundaries. I don't decline completely that some things may have happened where people were forced to accept Islam. You can't play with the rule of probability. You can't
Hmm.
associate superlatives with something huge. You can't say that Islam was never spread at the tip of the sword, because that would be
True.
factually incorrect.
Yes.
However, that was extremely limited. And historically speaking, when you look at
Mhm.
people accepting Islam, they didn't accept
Yeah,
because they were forced to, and I'm talking about majority of them. They
exactly.
accepted because of the way Muslims were treated in those territory.
True.
You see what I'm saying? So, for example, let me
True.
give you an example. Women were treated miserably in Europe, even during the Dark Ages. When we had our golden age, they had their dark ages.
Mm.
While we were setting up hospitals during the golden age of Islam, and this is very important perspective, so please listen carefully. While we were setting up hospitals to deal with many uh, ailments or diseases, one of the departments that we set up was psychiatric ward. Okay, separate department to deal with people who have some issues with their mind, which is psychiatric treatment. The Europeans were on a witch hunt. Okay, so if you had even slightest of hint coming from a person who may have been mentally disturbed or disabled, they would simply deem that person as possessed. And we
Yeah,
were
yeah,
setting up hospitals to treat them medically.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there is a difference in the way we treated people
True,
and
true,
they treated people. Why do you
true.
think historically all Jews felt safe with Islamic caliphates?
Yes.
You see
Yes.
what I'm saying? And
Yeah,
we
yeah.
talk so much about crusades and things like that, uh, which I'm also I'm doing a lot of parallel researches. This is one of my subject of research of how crusaders were. Uh, but I don't know if, if I should say this, but do you know that they were cannibals?
I've
They
heard.
used to eat
I've
human
heard.
flesh.
Humans, yes, they used to eat. Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, And contrast that with Salahuddin al Ayyubi. And I'm just spilling the beans. My point,
True,
my
true.
subject of research is actually Salahuddin Ayyubi. Again, a book that I'm planning to write after
Yes,
7 8 months, and that's why I'm
inshallah.
researching Crusaders, right?
Mm.
Why do you think even Catholics or Christians? Let me just not say Catholics. Catholics, Crusaders, they have a different thing. But even
Yes,
Christians, do you know there's a difference between Christians and Catholics, right?
yes. Yeah, yeah.
Even Christians felt safer with Muslims under their
Muslims.
Khilafat
Yes, yes.
because Catholics were coming after them.
True,
You see what I'm
true.
saying? They felt more connected with our faith. Now, coming to Imam Ghazali and the disagreement that we had, or just a different perspective that you showed,
Yeah,
I do not disagree with you when it comes to his religious aspects. Okay? Like I said, people make mistakes and we have to accept people the way they are. That is the hallmark of being an alim. Okay?
true,
We cannot expect an alim to not make a mistake. Okay, like one
true.
of my friends once told me, they are alims, they are not angels. They will make mistakes. The
Yeah,
problem is with us not accepting that they could make mistake. So Imam Ghazali's one aspect was incorrect, that should not have happened. That categorical situation that he did and many other people did should not have happened. But there are so many other things that he did. The fact that he acknowledged that I became arrogant says so much about that man, does it not?
yeah,
But are we willing to accept that fact? Are we willing to accept that our Imam, whoever we follow, could have made a mistake and not drive the disagreement to such an extent that we stop going to each other's masjid to pray?
yeah,
I shouldn't even say each other's masjid.
yeah,
I mean, that's a wrong thing to say. We stop
yeah.
going to masjid to pray.
Agreed,
See what I'm
agreed.
saying? So it's what we have to come to terms with the fact, and we need to stop being blind followers. We
True.
need to accept that the only way forward is to enlighten our children. Okay,
Yes,
today when a Muslim is challenged, today when a Muslim is said, what have you contributed? What do you have to say to that? Do you
exactly.
have any academic response to that? I
True.
mean, yes, you can say Imam, sorry, Ibn al-Haysham did such and such thing. Ibn Sina did such and such thing. All somebody has to do is come up with a counter, and you will not have any other response.
Very true.
Okay, so when you say Ibn Sina gave canon of medicine, and I uploaded a video that he taught the world that you need to wash hands before you do surgery. Okay,
Mm.
and people targeted me by countering me by certain things that this never happened. Okay, but
Mm.
because I have knowledge, I could academically refute it. But if
Yes.
you just had learnt it from YouTube or Google, that you know what he taught us doing this,
Yeah.
somebody counters you, and what do you have to say?
True.
Nothing. Which is
True.
why we have to read, which is why we have to learn, and which is why I wrote this book. Because one Salim Khan saying this will have little impact, but 10,000 Salim Khans saying the same thing,
Yeah.
imagine the
Agreed.
impact that will have. That's
Agreed.
how opinions are formed, isn't it?
Yes.
Backed by, and you have to be absolutely certain that this is backed by data. And
Yes.
believe me when I say this, there are so much resources available for you if you just have to read. That's it.
True.
If you read,
And
that
and
is.
this and this reminds me of one of the first verses that was revealed in the Quran, right? Ikra.
Iqra. In
Read.
fact, you know what? This is okay. I promise I'll not share this book again. Uh, what I wanted
That's
to,
fine.
what I
Mm.
wanted to show, because you pointed that out. The last sentence, I'll read it out to you. Okay. Last para. We have been cut off from our history, ancestral achievements, and legacy for a long time. Several reasons exist, from Mongol invasions to burning 400,000 manuscripts from the Library of Cordoba, from Christian conquests and decimation of knowledge to the civil war between different sects of Islam. We ought to take the blame upon ourselves. I say this in my book.
Yes.
It is not too far fetched to say that we Muslims dug our own graves. Centuries later, our generation is facing intellectual oppression. We are constantly challenged to prove our knowledge and looked down upon as a civilization that has given nothing to this world except suicide bombers and men with masks carrying guns terrorizing people. We are cornered and left dumbfounded. We have no substantial response to these allegations. But that can change. You can change that. You can be that change, and it is ironic as nothing aforementioned would have come to pass if we followed the first command of Allah, Iqra, meaning read.
Yes.
And that's
Love
how I
it.
conclude my
Love it.
book. And we've stopped reading.
Yes. I want to end on that controversial topic to ensure that people understand this, because that this is a very common thing that happens across groups. You know it, I know it, right? We go across. So I think just like what the discussion we had, that even though we had a difference of opinion, we acknowledge each other. We understand that these are the common grounds that we need to work on to ensure that we can work together to become a better version and of ourselves. And I think this is important, guys, that these kind of discussions are important for us to have. And then don't be afraid, don't defend ourselves, don't try to be like, no, this is not right, we should no, it's fine, acknowledge it, but move on. Then work on, okay, what can we do to fix these scenarios? Because this reminds me of uh, the saying that that scholar had once told me. He has said, God on the final day basically is not only primarily going to judge you on a lot of other things. He primarily is going to be asking you, okay, who are you, like what did you do as an individual, as an individual. So your path to your Lord is individual, right? So let's focus on ourselves. What can we do? What's in our control? Let's build that unity between each other. That's all we can do. Keep our differences aside, work on the unity. That's the only way we could inshallah possibly come forward. Now I wanted to go and basically talk about something which was very important, and that's the entire context of a conversation, right? Which is what can we do to ensure the the new the our youth, right? The youngsters that are coming up, the Muslim youth, what can they do to ensure that they can have that knowledge, that academic knowledge to defend themselves, not only defend themselves, but be able to understand that this is what Islam was all about. These were the discoveries that we've had, which we have forgotten. The first step, I know what they have to do. They need to get your book to at least get some idea around what this is happening. That's the first one. Second, what are some other top two, three things that you think we should do?
Honestly, that is not the first step. You don't really need to get my book to understand that. You just need common sense. That's the first thing. And I'll give you a simple example to cite this thing. So, one of the retailers from Bangalore wanted to buy my book for selling in his shop. But he asked me a question. He said, our readers want to know if you are Shia or Sunni. And I asked why. Then he said, because you wear black, and we just want to make sure that you are not Shia or Sufi. If we have such superfluous or such shallow way of approaching things and completely discounting the work based on the appearance of a person, how will we grow? It is not possible. So, what you need to do is you need to grow beyond these thought processes. I wear black because I like black, simple as that. Not that I wear black every time, but because when I started recording the reads, the first outfit I wore was black, and I don't have a lot of clothes. Simple as that. So I'd like to keep it black. It's simple as that. So um, that's why I wear black. But apparently, that has a calling of its own. And if we lay such hurdles in front of us, this hurdle was not laid out by anyone else. We are laying these hurdles in front of ourselves. How will we grow? So, basic thing you need to have is have common sense. Okay, and let's say for the sake of it, I am Shia. I don't recognize myself or identify myself as a Shia. I believe in Sunni version of following Islam, although I have amazing Shia friends, which I by now you would
Yeah,
understand the kind of person I am, that I do have a lot of
yeah,
Shia friends. That's just how it is, and I respect them a lot. I personally believe they are Muslims because they do say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Khalas, to me, they are Muslims. Then rest of the things is between them and Allah.
yeah.
Okay, I have amazing people who speak very freely to me, and they never even think about whether I'm Shia or Sunni before speaking to me. And these are the people who I know. So the first thing you need to do is, if you really want to know what Shia are about, instead of laying hurdles in front of you, read their books. Read what they have to say. Don't listen to a version of what somebody might have told you. Like I said, be a researcher, ask for proof. Don't take anything for face value, because we have a lot of people
Yes.
dividing us already. Okay, we don't need
Yes.
further division. And if you don't agree with their thought process, the way they approach Islam, it's fine. Agree to disagree and at least find some common grounds. During the golden
Yes.
age of Islam, there were Muslims, overwhelmingly Muslims. There were atheists, there were Christians,
Yep.
there were
Yep.
Jews who all contributed. In
Yep.
fact, I told you at the beginning that we had a translation movement. Okay, the
Yep.
chief
Yes.
translator, Hunayn ibn Ishaq, was a Christian. So
Interesting.
Abbasids didn't think of whether you are Christians or uh, atheist or Persians for that matter. They took into consideration whether you're honest and capable of doing things within the fold of Islam. Of course, they would not take anybody who would openly disrespect the Prophet. That is no negotiations there. But there was respect among the people when it comes to scholarly circle. You know what I mean? So that's what we need to bring. And then once you have that ground set, if you want to buy my book, you can buy my book and learn about our golden age. And then don't stop there. Like, I have not stopped. In my book, I say I have now dedicated my entire life to writing many more books during the gold of
Yes.
the golden age of Islam and other topics that affect our Muslim brethren. So I will do that, and I will do that absolutely neutrally. And I set my background. When I write my book, I have a very single page paragraph which says preparing you for the book. Okay, right before you start reading the book, I say this is not a Shia or Sunni book. This is an academic approach, so take it that way. And we need to apply the same thing in our daily lives.
Yep.
Teach your children to become scientists, teach them to become lawyers, teach them to become IAS officers, teach them to become IPS, teach them to become surgeons, teach them to become astronomers, doctors, basically teach them to become achievers.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is how you will unite, and that is how you will strengthen the ummah. You
Yep.
have to understand the battles today are not fought on the ground, they are fought here academically. And I say this
Yes.
in a very positive way. I don't say that
Yes.
you acquire knowledge and go start harming others, like targeting non-Muslims and saying this is what we did and this is what you didn't do, etc. No, that's not the purpose of uh, humanity. Okay, at least have some sort of concession that this this earth was made by Allah. Even though they don't follow Allah the way we do, they are still Allah's creation.
He's
Correct?
still sustaining them.
Yes, exactly. That's the whole point. If he's doing it, why can't you undertake the same thing? Why have that hatred in your heart about them just because they follow a certain version of what a certain imam said? Should we be doing that? No. So I think that is the fundamental thing that we need to bring back, so that our current and next generation does not cut themselves off from our Islam. I've
Yes.
had so many people who've bought my book, parents who've bought my book and said, my teenage child has completely cut herself off because she has this doubt. How did Prophet marry a 6-year-old? Until you give me an answer to that question,
Mm.
I will not follow.
Yep.
My own niece asks that question. How can a man who we follow so openly marry a 9-year-old or a 6-year-old? Of course, I had my answer. And in fact, my sister-in-law is quite knowledgeable when it comes to these things. So she answered the question academically, and she's fine. The bottom line is,
Yeah.
teenagers,
Yeah.
she's 13 years old, 14 years old, they want answers to these questions. And because we
Yes.
have long dwelled in this fact that he did marry a 6-year-old, which actually never happened. Okay, we are now unable to answer these questions, and that is why our ulama are losing touch of our generation. And this current generation, next generation, does not want to be a part of this religion, I would say, unfortunately. uh, but if we have academic responses, if we have answers to those questions, I've researched on that topic. That question bothered me as well when I
Yeah.
started to accept Islam, and I'm still a Muslim. not because
Yeah.
somebody told me something, but I found out that was never true.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and
So
I've
I
never
want to
shared
understand.
this,
That's
but
a very important point. Yeah.
yeah.
Do you mind sharing it? Because I've done my own research. I have a different. I'll tell you what it is, but if you don't mind, please, because it's interesting.
Okay, so a simple thing is that many people want to follow ancillary subjects or ancillary books, something that is either subordinate or how do you say, not primary, secondary, right? Hadith and things like that. But
Hmm.
if you read Quran and try to understand Quran, and this is my perspective, you can completely disagree with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, my perspective is very simple. There is an ayah in Quran. Now, since this came out of nowhere, I don't have the ayah to quote, but you can check Quran.
Sure.
Had this been a part of our discussion or
Yep.
agenda, I would have noted that down. I read an ayah in Quran which wherein Allah clearly says that if a girl is of age, if a girl has come of age where she can understand inheritance, listen carefully. When she can understand inheritance, then please offer her inheritance. When she's able to understand her share, okay?
Mm.
But
Yeah.
if she has not come of age, keep it safe with you. You
Mm.
get the point? Okay.
Yes.
So, a simple understanding to that is if a girl, if Allah says, do not share the inheritance unless she is able to understand, how can Allah be okay with marrying a 6 year old, a prophet marrying a 6 year
True.
old? Because which 6 year old is able to understand her inheritance? And if that 6 year old or even 9 year old is unable to understand the inheritance, tell me how is she able to understand what marriage is? Do you get the point? And we get a lot of rebuttals to this. I hear a lot that Aisha was an exception. Okay, Aisha narrated 2000 hadith. Can you tell me any woman in the history of Islam who has narrated 2000 hadith? This is the narrative that is given to us to defend that.
Yeah.
Okay, my counter question is very simple. How many of those hadiths did she narrate when she was 6 year old? She was just another 6 year old. And then we are given another reason that this is nothing new, this used to happen. And even until 200 years ago, kings married children, women who are 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, right? Okay, fine. Are you comparing kings with prophet? What kind of comparison is that? So either you say our prophet is just like that king, which is despicable to say
Not
the
true. Yeah.
least,
Yeah. Yeah.
or that argument falls apart, effective immediately, right? Or they say women, another argument, women matured early. Arab was hot and women matured quickly, and they developed those body parts which were capable of progeny, or uh, if that's the right word, capable
Procreation.
of
Yeah.
procreation, right? Does that mean she'd get married? No. So, like I said, I have a 13-year-old niece in all contexts. Does this mean we'll get her married? No, of course. That's why the exception comes in. So when you
Yeah.
ask them, you have a 6 year old daughter, will you get her married? You'll say no, but Aisha was an exception. And that brings me to the point where it says she narrated 2000 hadiths, that's why she was exceptional. Then tell me how many hadiths she narrated when she was 6 year old? None. And the final point is people say uh, nobody criticized Prophet for doing that. There were many people who made many slanderous statements about the Prophet in the old Arabia, right? But why didn't they criticize the Prophet for marrying a 6 year old? Correct. This is the fair, I mean, question
Yes.
that they ask, right? And they rationalize it by saying they didn't criticize him or slander him because it was a common practice. That is the justification given. Okay.
Mm.
But here's the thing: if Prophet never married her, where will the criticism come from? Something that has never happened. How will you find that in books of criticism or evidence of that, for that matter? Do
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I just didn't give you why I believe he didn't marry
Why?
6 year old.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I painted the entire picture in front of you. That's what a researcher does. Like I said, I do not take anything off of the face value. And this is where I have my beef with our ulama,
Mm.
because they didn't defend our prophet the way it should be defended. And there was always a uh, there's no better way to say it, so I'll say it. There's always a patriarchal edge to it, or this could have been basically a hearsay spread about the prophet. Why? Because hadith is authority. Okay, and perhaps there were people, don't quote me on this, but perhaps there
Sure.
were people who wanted to marry children after Prophet, that is, and they concocted these things so that people will not question. Even today, when uh, when it comes to second marriage or third marriage, right? And when we get a rishta and we say, no, I don't want to be a second wife of somebody, hypothetically speaking, people tell them that those sisters, if they've just gone past a certain age, people tell those sisters, are you not following the sunnah? You see what I'm saying? So we are using hadith to detriment or look down upon others, make people or belittle people. And it could have happened. I see it happening right now in front of me. Like few days ago, it happened in front of me with one of my close relatives. Who's to say it never happened in the past? So that is my reason why I
Got it.
believe
Got it.
my prophet could never do something like that. That's
Yes.
you are free to disagree with, but
Yeah, yeah.
that's my opinion.
Well, that's good to know.
Can of
Perspective
worms.
to me. That's why. Yeah, no, no, not can of worms, but perspective. And I'm
Yeah,
I'm always curious about different perspectives.
but there will be a can of worms in the
That's
comment
fine,
sections.
and that's totally fine. I think people, and these are things that we need to talk about, think about. Like, I think it is important for us to know. Okay, one last question. Do you see any parallels between the intellectual curiosity of the golden age and the any emerging trends in the Muslim
Oh
world
yes,
today?
absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. In fact, if you look at Muslims around the world and compare them to Muslims from India, we are lagging behind in so many aspects. But let me justify what I just said. You will say, but there are so many people who have achieved so many things from within India. Look at India's population
Mhm.
and look at the number of people who have gone on to achieve something. The percentage I'm talking about, the ratio.
Yes. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have 20 crore Muslims, okay, and we have handful of achievers. Compare that even with the Arab world. Look at what they have achieved. Do you know that one of the biggest facility that tests physics or atoms is in CERN, which is in Switzerland? You might have heard CERN, CERN.
I've heard the place, but I did not know
It's
that
called
fact. Yeah.
collider. Like atomic
Okay.
collider is perhaps what its name is, where they collide atoms to reach the speed of
Okay.
light. Right? Do you know something like that is already being built in an Arab world?
Wow. Hmm.
Yeah, and we are already researching on that. And
Wow.
many scholars from Iran, from Saudi, have moved to USA and they're doing their research. For example, the research that I talked about, AI Sabra, on Ibn al-Haytham's Book of Optics. Arab, another one. So there were three people who researched on this book. Two of them are Muslims or Arabs at least. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So we are growing. We are making significant enrolls into achievements. We have people in US who are writing op-eds, people who are writing papers, people who are in the field of journalism. Mehdi Hassan, you know him. Everybody
Hmm.
knows him,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Correct. So when I look at him, I don't care if he's a Shia or a Sunni. Does he ask himself when he talks about Gaza, for example? Does he,
Yeah.
or when he talks about Israel and whatever is happening in the Middle East, does he ever
Yeah.
say that I will only talk about it if it's for Shias? No, that's the
Yeah.
essence of Islam, right? Whereas out, I don't know whether, but when you look at the name Mahdi Hassan,
Yeah.
one can clearly deduce that he belongs to the Shia community. I
Yeah.
may be wrong,
Yeah.
forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm just going by the name. But look at his achievements and compare that with 20 crore Muslims. How many more achievers should we have had?
Yes.
Okay, and it goes back to a simple fundamental, and I'll touch base on this because this is again something that needs addressing. I don't know why people don't address it. And it comes back to a simple fundamental that deen should be made free. Okay. And I completely disagree with that. And allow me to explain that. It is because we have had this uh, outlook that deen should be made free or it should be made cheap and available at mass. That is the reason why our madrasas are still teaching things with the infrastructure that is 30 years old, because they don't have funds enough to, or again, I don't know whether they have it or they're not using it. That's a different matter altogether. But can you tell me any madrasa in India that can compare to Harvard University? Now, don't tell me these are two different things. Fundamentally, they are the
Yes.
same.
Yeah.
They're both institutions
Yeah.
that impart knowledge, correct?
Yeah.
Why is Harvard where it is? Because they invest heavily in millions, hundreds of millions. There are grants that US government gives them of billions of dollars, but that's not just it. They have grants coming in from everywhere, which our madrasas also get. But why are we not spending? And why I say this is very simple. Look at the state of our imams in the country. A basic salary of an imam is 10,000 or 9,000 rupees.
Yeah.
And when I, I, I asked people, why don't we openly contribute to the expenses of masjids? They say, why should we? He should do it for free. Why is he charging money? Does he not have his family? Does he not have children to
Yeah.
have a upbringing?
Yeah.
Right? I had an imam who spoke with me when I was selling tracing Quran. He told me, I really want to buy it, but I can't afford it. I asked him why. He said,
Yes.
I earn 9,000 rupees and I'm not even able to pay insurance for my children. He has two children, not even a big family, two children and a wife, and I'm not able to pay, look after them, not able to take care of their education. Why? It all stems from the fact that deen should be made free. No, we should at least pay them enough so
Yes.
they come to us. I'll give you a simple example on this. Let's say you do PhD and you're an excellent teacher. Okay, there is one Islamic institute that approaches you and tells you, please teach this in our school or madrasa, because school is madrasa in Arabic. Indian Institute of Management or Harvard Institute approaches you, okay, and tells you, please teach the same thing in our school. One is offering you $1 million, one is offering you $1,000. Where will you go?
Obviously, if I have a lot of money
Correct.
already, money is not a
Yes,
concern.
that is the big point. And I'm glad you brought that up, because many people counter me by saying, but there are so many people who teach for free. Agreed? When you look at
Yeah.
those people, they are not the primary bread earners. None of them is a primary bread earner. And in most cases, they are women. Okay, and they are able to do it because their husbands and their sons are able to go out
Yes.
and earn enough money
Yeah.
to look after their family. That's not the case with
Hmm.
our imams. They are the bread earners.
Yes.
So if we
Now,
don't
and that's a
pay,
very point. Yeah.
then we will stagnate. That outlook may work for 1 or 2 generations, but over the course of 50,
Yes.
60 years, we see what's happening today.
Yes.
There is no intellectual.
Agreed. I totally agree with your point here, right? Like, we definitely need to pay imams more so that they could at least provide to their families, right? I know a lot of the imams that I particularly also know are getting paid in between the range of 15, 20. Yeah, if you're talking about some big masjids, they get paid more. I know about that. But
Yes,
majority of them are not in that criteria.
exactly.
They're not in that
Exactly.
category as well, if
And
at
when
all.
you compare the imam from India with imams from any other country, barring Pakistan, okay, any other country, you look at the situation, you look at the state. They
Yeah.
are able to look after their family. I'm not saying they're rich, but they are able to look after
Yes.
their families. And that comes from the communal harmony, community. If together, like place where we live, for namaz, Friday prayer, we have to have at least two jamaat because there are so many people.
Mm.
Okay, but very few contribute. Even today, our imams sit on the member and say, we need to build masjid, we need money. Why would an imam say
Yes.
that if there is an overwhelming majority of people already contributing? That's because what we've started to do is we have made masjid our jagir. Okay, we will take the services of the masajids, but we will not serve the masjids.
It's a very
That
powerful
is the
concept.
fundamental problem that we have, and we need to address that. We need to solve that. If we don't look after our masjids,
Yes.
who else will?
Very true.
So this all stems from, uh, I mean, they are all sort of coiled together.
Yeah.
It all
Yeah.
started with stating deen should be made free, deen should be made available. No, no, no. There's a difference between making things free and things being free. Okay, if I want to buy a book, or let's say there is people say madrasa, in madrasa we take care of free education, we provide education for free. Okay, that is taken as a basis to apply to other contexts like imam and all books and all those
mm,
things.
mm.
But what you don't understand is, even though children are getting it for free, it is not free. There are other people who are paying for it, right?
Yes.
Food expenses, electricity expenses, clothing expenses, Quran reading expenses. There are other people who are funding it. That is why these things are being made for free.
Yeah.
Because if you make it free, it may work once or twice. For example, if there are 10 people, 10 children in a madrasa, okay, they need to be fed. You can go to a shop that is owned by a Muslim and say, can you make it for free? He will do it once or twice,
Yeah.
but not beyond that.
Yeah.
That's what I say, it's not sustainable. In order for you to sustain something for a long period of time, you have to find sources that will fund that education. It is made free for those children who cannot afford, but it is not free. I know a brother of mine, a very good friend, I'm not sure if you're aware, Wali Rahmani. He lives in Calcutta. He owns a school,
Okay.
Umeed
Okay.
Global School, and he has made a top class facility, and he charges 2.5 lakh rupees per year. So people targeted him. If you're spreading, and it's in I think it's CBSE board, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
uh, but it's because it's head by a Muslim, majority of children are Muslim, and they get excellent education. So again, they started targeting him, stating, why don't you make it for free? Why do you charge 2.5 lakh rupees? He had to come out and hold a press conference to justify that why he's charging 2.5 lakh rupees. I don't think there is any institute in India that is Islamic minded that has extensive library like he does. I don't think there's an
Mm.
institute that imparts knowledge through computers the way he does. So all these things require money in crores of rupees. When he came out
Yes.
to ask for money, he had to justify the cost of an egg. Can you believe that
Yeah.
is where we are at the
Yeah.
moment? And that is why I say, stop expecting things to be made for free. The more you value it, the more you should spend on deen, on people. Today we say, I want my daughter to learn Quran as per tajweed, but I am not able to find a good tajweed teacher. My answer is, why will you find a tajweed? How will you find a tajweed teacher? If I learn tajweed through proper sources, it means I have dedicated my life to it and I have spent money. And if I'm not able to earn that back and look after my family, why would we have like plethora of tajweed teachers? We won't. That is why, and that is how we kill intellectual behavior. That is how we kill the thought process. I hope you get the point I'm trying to draw.
This was a very good pointer to end on, right? I totally agree that we need to obviously, these are some actual real challenges that are underlying. Sometimes people talk about it, sometimes they don't. But these are really important things that we need to, as a community, figure out and, work towards improving our own, like what you just said, if we don't help our masjid, if we don't contribute, if we don't service it, who will come forward, right? It's on us to service our masjid. It's on us to maintain them. So I totally agree with that. I think we have covered a lot of ground, Salim, today. I know we have talked about a lot of things, golden age of Islam, some controversial topics, some also real underlying, yeah, some really underlying issues that are eh, pertinent today in this world, right? And what can we do to typically maybe better the situation, improve ourselves, help the youth to start learning more, read, ikra, right? Like go read. That's the main thing. The more you read, the better you become. So one last thing before we wrap, how can people reach out to you, Salim? What's the best way to reach out to you? Reach out to
You
you.
can reach out to me at my email kalamarkagas@gmail.com, and you can reach out to me on my Instagram, uh, and you can connect with me. There are many ways. You can message me on DM. There are many people who spam me. I don't watch those videos. I don't reply to them. But if you have a genuine question uh, related to golden age of Islam, please understand I'm not a faqih. So many people come to me asking questions regarding fiqh. I would say you do your own research. My point of views may not be the point of views that you will agree with. But for anything related to research work that is about the golden age, or if you want to know what books to read, not just my book, I openly tell people there are other books that you can actually consider buying, albeit they are even more expensive than my book, at least twice or thrice the price. But hey, if you can afford, alhamdulillah, go ahead and buy those books. Um, and just do your research. Today research has become so accessible to us, it has never been so easy. So please read about Islam and go with the mindset that people make mistakes. In fact, the beauty of Islam is, and beauty of all those ulama, is in their mistakes, in their flaws. In spite of them being flawed, the one thing that I do stand by is their commitment towards Allah. uh, they
Yes.
wanted to make sure that they are honest, and they may have made mistakes. It's between them and Allah, but you accept the fact that we make mistakes as human beings. It is a fundamental nature to make mistakes. And then, yeah, I mean, these are the ways you can reach out to me. If you have any questions, email is the best. I do respond to my emails. And Instagram is the other way.
And I will also go ahead and include all the links, links to your Instagram, links to
Right.
buy your book, so that anyone who wants to go ahead and do that can simply go to the description of the podcast and be
And
able to get
again,
it.
like I said, any book that you want to buy, go ahead, buy, start learning, start reading. My If you like my book,
Yes.
uh, if you like the opinions that I have, and if you think it can, if you're a parent and if you think you want to bring up your child imbibed in knowledge, both dini as well as dunyavi, if you think I resonate with you, you're welcome to buy my book. uh, in any case, even if you disagree, do not stop learning, keep learning. That is my message to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Salim, for taking your time out and joining us on the Growth Mindset podcast. It was a
You are
pleasure to have
welcome.
you.